Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my reflections. A number of colleagues have expressed displeasure on the privileging of the war in Gaza as opposed to the many wars going on the African continent in public discussions. Because these debates are largely taking place within the social media space, it has been difficult to have a discussion that sheds proper light on the matter. Social media discussions are very transient in nature. I am fairly knowledgeable on the topic of conflict and conflict systems. Before specializing in regional integration, particularly participatory regionalism, I had been on a PhD program on international conflict management at Masinde Muliro University of Science and Technology. The university's Peace and Conflict Department is well known in this area of study. My aim today is to use this knowledge to try and inform this emerging concern and aspect of the broader debate. Conflicts and conflict systems are dynamic. They have histories, politics, memories, trajectories. They are informed by disagreements based largely on values and interests. This means, therefore, that there are also parties to conflicts. The nature of their engagement in the conflict and even the parties themselves may change over time. These parties are in competition about values and interests. This dynamic is also therefore mitigated by the power resources that one has at their disposal. The more resources, the more ability to win in a given conflict. Understanding conflicts also entail understanding how knowledge systems are created and maintained. I have often invoked Professor Samuel Makinda's well-articulated view that knowledge systems are created to serve certain interests. This is a constructivist understanding of the issue. Many people take knowledge for granted, never deconstructing the knowledge or the knowledge system itself. Older folks may remember the much maligned modernization theory as a good example of what it means to create knowledge systems to achieve certain interests. It took years before the global south decided that this theory was created to maintain the status quo of relations between north and south and come up with the dependency theory to explain things from the perspective of the south. This is when folks like Kwame Nkrumah and Walter Rodney wrote their most significant works about the nature of exploitation. Flowing from the above is the view that the first casualty in any conflict or war is the truth. Each party jostles to frame the conflict to their advantage, hence the use of propaganda. In other words, there is a knowledge economy around any conflict, and it is informed by values and interests that parties hold and the resources at their disposal, which enable them to frame the conflict to their advantage and win support from other parties for their cause. Finally, there's something called internationalization of conflict. This happens when parties to a conflict seem to draw in a large audience to understand their perspective as opposed to the perspective of the other parties to the conflict. I always use the example of the International Criminal Court as has often been used by the Kenyan elite to leverage in their struggles for power. Threats of referring situations to the ICC are an aspect of internationalization to the extent that parties seek to enlarge the conflict by bringing in other parties hitherto not involved in the conflict to be part of it. Needless to say, when such parties become part of a conflict, they also come with their own values and interests, thus further complicating the resolution of the conflict itself. But the most important agent of internationalization today is social media. The traditional media has in the past been deployed for purposes of propaganda. Old folks may remember listening to the BBC every evening to know what was happening in Africa during those days of censorship. However, radios and TVs have owners who structure their content using editorial policies. It is easier to control this media of communication as opposed to social media. In many ways, social media has democratized public debate and created an international audience. This has significantly changed the nature of conflicts, how they are perceived, and how they are debated across the world. The world's dominant classes, who have always controlled the flow of information, have found themselves mere victims of this new phenomenon. The owners of CNN do not wield the same power they used to wield years ago. This does not mean that attempts have not been made to control the flow of information on social media. Hence the closure of social media spaces during moments of political tension in various countries, the use of social media surveillance tools, artificial intelligence, algorithms, etc. But to a large extent, the social media space has remained the most liberalized form of communication. I can say much more on this topic, but the 5 points above are sufficient for the purpose at hand. The widespread, and some may argue this is a false assumption, support today for the Palestinian cause is informed by this general framework that I've provided. It is the result of the convergence of these and many other factors, some historical, others episodic and contextual. In today's world of instant information, issues are competing to dominate the social media space. How an issue performs in this space, therefore, depends on the urgency of those interested in profiling the issue. In other words, don't agonize, organize. Thank you.